Imagine being born in a forgotten village and becoming the creator of the most coveted machine on earth. This is the story of a man who transformed pain into design and failure into luxury. But behind the elegance lay war, pride, and a decision that nearly destroyed everything. Ferruccio Lamborghini was born in 1916 in Renazzo di Cento, a forgotten farming village on the Italian map. His home, a modest building with lime-stained walls and the smell of diesel in the air. His father was a wine grower. His mother was a housewife. While other children dreamed of being soldiers or priests, Ferruccio fell in love with the gears of an old engine dismantled behind the family barn. He didn't study mechanics. He felt mechanics. At 13, he was already repairing neighborhood tractors with a hammer, pliers, and pure instinct. But there was a dark detail in his personality. Ferruccio didn't just want to fix machines. He wanted to master them. It was as if, inside that humble boy, there was an obsessed engineer, ready to explode, just waiting for the world to fail him. And the world would make a big mistake. Imagine waking up every day to the smell of manure, the metallic noise of plow wheels, and the sun beating down on your skin before you even have breakfast. Life on the farm wasn't romantic. It was mud, calluses on the hands, and sweat that burned the eyes. Ferruccio grew up with his bare feet in the mud and his body carrying bags of fertilizer, bigger than him. But while the other children ran after chickens or played with sticks and stones, he watched, fascinated, as his father's old tractor sputtered with each start. Those rusty gears, which for many were just work tools, for Ferruccio were mechanical poetry. It was there, among the burnt oil and dust, that the obsession was born. Obsession with understanding, with perfecting, for transforming raw machines into masterpieces. But the world wasn't ready for that. Not back then, not in that place. It was the 1930s. The world looked to the glamour of Hollywood, movie stars, and the promises of an easy life in big cities. But Ferruccio didn't want fame nor luxury. He dreamed of something that no one saw. While kids his age collected artist posters and dreamed of Italian suits, Ferruccio collected rusty engine parts and scribbled transmission designs on pieces of bread paper. Where most saw grease and noise, he saw beauty, harmony, pure power. While the world dreamed of Hollywood, he dreamed of engines. It was a rare kind of vision, not of where he was, but of where he could get to. But the world was about to put him to the cruel test, because before creating the most luxurious car in history, Ferruccio Lamborghini would have to survive the war. Poverty was not a temporary condition. It was the soil in which Ferruccio was born. In his youth, luxury meant eating fresh bread, new clothes only at funerals. But it was the war that truly tested his soul. When World War II broke out, Ferruccio was drafted, not as a soldier, but as a mechanic in the Italian army. He spent years in the fields of North Africa, repairing tanks amidst firefights, creating parts from scratch with whatever he could get his hands on. Twisted metal, improvised tools, and pure genius. Every repair was a bet against death. Every noise in the engine was the difference between coming back alive or exploding on the road. Ferruccio learned to do the impossible. With nothing, he learned to remain calm in the midst of chaos, and above all, he learned that only those who were precise, fast, and relentless would survive. He returned from the war with colder eyes, a sharper mind, and a conviction: if I can fix tanks in the middle of war, I can build anything. Ferruccio returned from the war with no diplomas, no money, no contacts, just with grease-stained hands and a mind that I couldn't stop creating. While the world was rebuilding buildings, he dreamed of building something that never existed. But no one saw him as a creator, just as the farmer's son, the mechanic, the tractor man. And then comes the question that still screams today: how many geniuses does the world ignore just because they were born in the wrong place? But Ferruccio was going to force the world to listen. If this story has already made you look differently at the backstage of luxury, if you've begun to understand that behind every flawless machine, there's sweat, trauma, and obsession, so like this video and subscribe now. Because what comes next isn't just about cars, it's about ego, revenge, And the moment Ferruccio Lamborghini decided he would be bigger than the Ferrari myth itself. True luxury does not come from ostentation. It is born from pain and the refusal to be ignored. This channel is not about easy success. Here, each video is an autopsy of great empires, because behind every luxury, there is always a past that no one wants to show. If you feel like you were born for something greater, but the world hasn't seen it in you yet, then you're in the right place. Share, and be part of the Resilience Blueprints community, because the names that inspire the world were almost always ignored in the beginning. When Ferruccio returned from the war, Italy was destroyed, but where most saw ruins, he saw opportunity. With what little he had, he set up a small vehicle repair shop. It was a makeshift shed with borrowed tools and a dirt floor, and it was there that Ferruccio began to create not just machines, but reputation. He wasn't just a mechanic. It was someone who listened to the engine, like a conductor listens to a symphony out of tune. And while others were just fixing things, he was improving things. It transformed old engines into unexpected powerhouses. And so his first company was born, Lamborghini Trattori, a tractor factory made from recycled military parts. In a war-torn country, farmers had no money for new tractors. Ferruccio saw this and created powerful, affordable machines made from war remnants. Soon he was no longer the village mechanic, to become the industrialist who supplied the entire Italian countryside. He was rich, influential, but still unsatisfied, because deep down, between one gear and another, the boy who dreamed of real engines was still awake. The war had left Italy in ruins, broken cities, dead economy. But in the fields, farmers still needed to plant, harvest, survive. There was just one problem. Tractors were scarce, expensive, unaffordable. Ferruccio saw what no one else saw. There were hundreds of abandoned military engines, tanks, trucks, jeeps. He bought it for next to nothing and turned scrap into brute force. His first empire was born there, Lamborghini Trattori, recycled war engines, mounted on adapted chassis and delivered to a country hungry for reconstruction. Lamborghini tractors were strong, cheap and nearly indestructible. Every unit sold wasn't just profit. It was a living reminder that Ferruccio had won the war not with weapons, but with ingenuity. Within a few years, he went from repairing to manufacturing, an assembly line, employees, expansion. The farmer was now a businessman, but there was still one detail that deeply bothered Ferruccio. He could have the most powerful tractors in the country, but the car he was driving, it was a Ferrari. And this Ferrari was about to cause one of the greatest upsets in automotive history. What for many was scrap, for Ferruccio was raw material for revolution. While most ignored the wreckage of war, he did just the opposite. He bought tank engines, military trucks, jeeps, all left behind by the troops. He studied every screw, every piece, every metal curve like an alchemist, and there was born his greatest innovation to date, transforming machines of destruction into tools of reconstruction. Ferruccio redesigned these engines to withstand civilian use, planting, harvesting, agricultural transport. He adapted cooling systems, converted combat transmissions into traction for the field, and he created tractors so powerful they looked like tanks, but with a new purpose: to feed, not destroy. The result: Lamborghini tractors began to dominate the Italian countryside. More resistant, cheaper, smarter. Ferruccio had done the impossible. He transformed the remains of a war into the engine of a new country. But his gaze was still restless, because inside that visionary industrialist, there still lived a boy obsessed with power, precision, and speed. A Lamborghini Trattori cresce em ritmo insano. From the small workshop in Renazzo to factories, trucks, exports, Ferruccio was now a millionaire. He had cars, properties, and respect. The mechanic had become a tycoon. But not all success silences a creator's hunger. Something inside him still bothered him. It wasn't greed, it was pride. Because, despite everything, he was still seen as the king of tractors. But when he got into his Ferrari, he felt like it wasn't his. The car was fast, beautiful, but unstable, too noisy. It had clutch problems. Ferruccio knew he could do better. I knew I could build a more powerful, more refined, more precise machine. And that's when he made the mistake that would change everything. He went to Enzo Ferrari, and he made a technical suggestion about the car he was driving. The answer? A provocation that became a legend. You're good for tractors, Lamborghini, not real cars. And in that instant, Ferruccio understood. If the world still underestimated him, he would build something so legendary that not even Ferrari would dare ignore. Ferruccio Lamborghini already had it all: money, influence, and a Ferrari in the garage. But that Ferrari, it was annoying. It was too noisy. It had constant clutch problems. Ferruccio, with his technical and precise gaze, opened the hood, studied, analyzed, compared, and he realized that the Ferrari clutch was practically the same one used in Lamborghini tractors. Annoyed, he went to Ferrari headquarters in Maranello. He asked for a meeting with Enzo, and with humility, but without fear, he pointed out the problem. You're using low-quality parts. This can be improved. What he expected was respect, an exchange of ideas between engineers. But what he received was a stab in the ego. You're just a farmer, a tractor manufacturer. What do you think you know about sports cars? That wasn't just a criticism. It was a challenge. And Ferruccio did not back down from challenges. He got out of the Ferrari with his blood boiling, and a decision made. He would build a car that would silence Enzo Ferrari, a car that would make the world forget who doubted it. It was the birth of an empire, but also the beginning of a silent war. October 1962, Ferruccio Lamborghini walks through the gates of Ferrari in Maranello, not as a fan, but as an engineer. He had faced wars, rebuilt the Italian countryside, founded a $1 million company from scratch. And now, I just wanted to chat with the biggest name in Italian motorsport. He sat at the table with Enzo, in a firm but polite voice. He explained his vision. Your Ferrari's gearbox is faulty. The clutches too. I have suggestions that could improve that. Enzo looked at him in silence. A long, dry, almost offensive silence. And then he replied, with the arrogance that the world already knew, Lamborghini, you know how to build tractors, but sports cars, leave that to me. It was a sentence, an offense, a psychological push. Ferruccio left without saying a word. But inside, something had changed forever. Humiliation did not break him. She lit something. That moment wasn't just a rejection. It was the flash that separated ordinary men from legend makers. And it was there, in that room, in that silence, that the desire for silent revenge was born. Ferruccio Lamborghini was no longer going to try to fix a Ferrari. He was going to create something that would make even Ferrari look outdated. The room was cold. The atmosphere was tense. Ferruccio Lamborghini calmly explained his points. He talked about the rough gear shift, the fragile clutch, and the unnecessary noise. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to improve on what he already admired. But Enzo Ferrari didn't see an ally there. He saw a threat. Enzo leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said with contempt, you know how to build tractors, but you'll never understand what a real car is. Silence. The kind of silence that cuts more than words. Ferruccio stared at Enzo for a few seconds. I didn't say anything. He just got up, left, and at that exact moment, the idea of creating a sports car stopped being a dream. It became a mission driven by pride, obsession, and revenge. Any other man would have swallowed his pride. He would have gone back to his tractors. I would have accepted the place the world reserved for me. But Ferruccio was not just any man. He didn't scream, didn't argue, just left. And he started drawing. He started planning, started recruiting. This humiliation became fuel for Italy's most provocative machine. It wouldn't just be a car, it would be a roar on wheels, a battle cry that would say to the world, the king of tractors has arrived to challenge the gods of asphalt. A few months after the humiliation, Ferruccio founded Automobili Lamborghini SPA, a factory in Sant'Agata Bolognese, in the heart of Italy. But he didn't want ordinary engineers. He hunted the best, the most rebellious, those who were tired of Ferrari's limitations. He brought together young visionaries like Giacomo Dallara, Paolo Stanzani, and Bob Wallace, raw talents who wanted to create something bold and were trapped within a conservative industry. And together, they began to draw a monster. A car that didn't even exist in dreams, rear mid-engine, like racing cars. Sculptural curves inspired by airplanes, a deep, metallic sound that made the heart vibrate. Ferruccio named his creation Miura, after a legendary breed of fighting bulls, because that car was a declaration of war. When the prototype was unveiled at the 1966 Geneva Motor Show, the hall fell silent. It was aggressive, sophisticated, impossible to ignore. The press said it was too beautiful to be real. Ferrari, no comment. But behind the scenes, I knew the empire had been challenged. Before the Miura shone in the spotlight, Ferruccio went through a silent hell. What no one saw were the lonely dawns in Sant'Agata, the clipboard covered in scribbles, cold coffee, and the sound of an engine that never worked as it should. The first prototypes failed. The chassis vibrated too much, the engine overheated, the pieces broke, and each failure cost thousands. Investors were doubtful. The press whispered, "The tractor man is playing at making a car." Debts began to grow. The pressure was unbearable. But Ferruccio wouldn't give in. I slept little, I ate badly, but it continued. He didn't just want to win. He needed to prove them wrong. And it was in this crossfire of failures and sleepless nights that the definitive Miura was born. The car that would silence the world, while the world would only see the brilliance of the Miura. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was one of war. Ferruccio's team was young, brilliant, and rebellious. Gianpaolo Dallara, Paolo Stanzani, Bob Wallace, names that are legends today, but at the time, they were gambles. Ferruccio didn't want the right guys in engineering. I wanted whoever dared. And so he accepted one of the most dangerous ideas of the time, placed the V12 engine in the center of the car, something common in racing cars, but unthinkable in a street vehicle. The risk was enormous, balance problems, overheating, extremely high costs. But it was either that, or continue in Ferrari's shadow. Ferruccio bet everything, diverted resources from the tractor line, cut personal expenses, and he gave carte blanche to the engineers. The project became a collective obsession. They tested during the day, and they redesigned everything overnight. They slept inside the factory. They broke parts with their own hands when something went wrong. Because they knew, they weren't just building a car. They were writing a chapter of history. 1966, Geneva Motor Show. Between conventional cars, shy flashes, and silent engines, a new roar ripped through the hall. It was a Lamborghini Miura, curvilinear, almost sensual lines, a short, aggressive body, looking like an animal about to attack, the hidden headlights, the air intakes, like the gills of a sleeping beast. What am I? The sound was not that of an engine. It was an era of revolt, a mid-rear V12 that purred like an impatient feline and bellowed like a raging bull. The journalists were in shock. Some said, "This is not a car, it's armed art." The Miura wasn't just beautiful. He was obscenely fast. It surpassed any Ferrari of the time. And it did so with an interior covered in fine leather, chrome accents, and a steering wheel that looked like a jewel. Visceral luxury, brutal performance, and an aura that no one could explain. But everyone wanted to touch. The Miura was not born to compete, born to dominate. And that day, Ferruccio Lamborghini made history. After the Miura, nothing was the same. Within a few months, the car was already the desire of millionaires, artists, and aristocrats. Frank Sinatra bought one. Steve McQueen wanted to. And every time Miura passed through the streets, the Ferrari engines seemed to whisper. Because now, the most respected sound in Italy was different. Ferruccio had done the unthinkable. He challenged an empire and won. His name is no longer that of the tractor man, and he became a living legend. Lamborghini now meant power, boldness, art at speed. But for Ferruccio, the real victory was not fame. It was seeing the world recognize that yes, a farmer, a mechanic, I could create the most luxurious car in history and do it with anger, passion, and surgical precision. Ferrari never responded publicly. But on the tracks, in the halls and in the whispers of the engineers, everyone knew the Lamborghini era had begun. Behind the tinted windows and Italian leather, there was tension, there was sweat, and there was a roar. This sound is not just engineering, it is revolt transformed into harmony. It was more than status, it was a password, a brand that only the bold could carry. The Lamborghini lifestyle cannot be bought. He incorporates himself. It is the silent cry of those who refuse to live an ordinary life. But not all was glory under the bull emblem. With success came weight. Lamborghini was growing faster than it could control. Sky high costs, chaotic logistics, pressure from investors, and behind the scenes, the conflicts began. Engineers who wanted fame, suppliers who sabotaged contracts, subtle betrayals within the board. Ferruccio began to isolate himself. The empire he had created with rage and precision was beginning to bleed from within. And as the world watched the gleaming machines cruise down the roads, I could see the tension seeping through every screw. Passion was beginning to turn into exhaustion, and what was once fuel was now weight. But the legacy was already sealed, because even with crises, sabotage, and betrayals, Ferruccio Lamborghini had carved his name into history. Today, the name Ferruccio Lamborghini is etched in history as a symbol of power, luxury, and resilience. But few remember that it all started in the dust of a farm, with greasy hands, with improvised engines, with wounded pride, and an unshakable obsession. If this story has shown you that greatness can come from anywhere, the next video will show you how another visionary turned trash into legacy. Are you ready for the next resilience plan? Like, subscribe, and leave your comment, and I will be happy to respond.